After 2 long years from April 17, cruise ships will be allowed to recommence operations in every state of Australia except WA. The first big ships are expected on the east coast in late May. But it has been 2 long years when suppliers to the industry, entertainers, food producers and travel agents have had to fend for themselves with no income. Edward Boyd visits some as they gear up to set sail.
About 1 year ago, we caught up with cruise ship entertainer James Buster. The truth is, at the time, he was juggling more than balls. He'd been forced to work on dry land in circuses, waiting for cruising to restart, waiting and waiting. But then he received a job offer in Singapore from Royal Caribbean Cruises.
Singapore was the first country in the world to come up with safe protocols and things like that to resume cruising and get cruising back into action. And I was lucky enough to be the kind of second headliner per se to be able to get back to work. And so I left Australia in July and I started my contract August 19th of 2021. And I'm still here now, but I get to leave in about 2 weeks, which is nice.
James is one of the lucky ones. The Aussie cruise industry employs about 18,000 people, and many of them were forced to transfer into other roles. But of all the people affected by the halt to cruising, specialist travel agents were hit hardest.
We've had 2 years of no revenue. Only if you've kept a mining contract in Western Australia. The majority of travel agencies are operating on more than 90% decreases from 19 levels.
These are just some of the giant cruise ships that have lain dormant for almost 2 years. These ghostly vessels resting at moorings off the coast of Manila, Miami and Rome.
Well, the ships that are normally based in Australia year-round have really just been waiting for the opportunity to return. So they've had limited staff on board who've been looking after the ships, maintaining the assets. Now they need to be ramped back up, they need to get the staff back on board, they need to get them trained, and they need to get those ships back to Australia.
Plenty of other cruise ships were scrapped, taken to shipyards in Bangladesh or Turkey and dismantled. But now, after being banned for 2 years, cruise ships will next month finally be allowed to return back to Australia.
I'm so happy to see that the government have decided to reopen our borders in terms of cruise ships and to see tourism get back into action in Australia. And by October, I hope to be back and kind of doing what I used to do, which was jump on and jump off different cruise ships and be able to travel and do my love, which is performing on stage.
Australia's cruise industry has lobbied the government for more than a year, saying cruising can be conducted safely with strict health protocols. What is patently clear is that after the debacle of COVID-affected passengers being allowed to disembark the Ruby Princess, sparking Australia's first significant COVID outbreak, governments have been wary, perhaps too wary, of allowing the ships back in. But as the community adapts to living with COVID, governments, state and federal, have rediscovered their nerve.
Before COVID, the cruise ship industry was delivering more than $5 billion of economic impact to the country each year. So we know that the 2 years that the industry hasn't been operating has cost us well over $10 billion. Those businesses have done it really tough and they can't wait to get back to work. And as soon as we see those first ships arriving, those suppliers will be able to start rebuilding their businesses.
And that means family companies including Select Fresh Providores are also back in business. Its key role is to supply fruit and vegetables for restaurants, cafes and hotels, but especially cruise ships.
Pre-COVID, we were probably doing about 75-80% of the cruise market in Australia.
Now, Group General Manager Stephen Biviano is gearing up, hiring staff to manage the expected increased demand.
Looking to probably build another team of around 30 staff. I think that's the optimum number. You know, we've got cruises that leave almost every day. There's at least a cruise ship leaving around Australia. So working with the teams to, like I said, to rebuild those, making the contacts now, heading into state, making sure we're ready to go when they start coming.
Select Fresh provides anywhere between 50 to 200 pallets of fruit and vegetables for each cruise ship. Cruises can go for several weeks, so there's a special strategy required to keep the produce fresh.
One thing we learned and we work with them is we stage everything. So when I say stage, you know, we've got rock hard avocados, we label them use last, use first. Bananas are green, so we know by the end of the cruise they're ready. Usually what they'll do is they will load up in other ports. So usually your leaf lines, delicate lines, they'll have a top-up order in those ports.
The tough pill for the industry to swallow is that cruising has been happening around the world for almost a year. Even here, Western Australia, with its particularly harsh COVID rules, is yet to allow cruise ships to return to WA waters.
So cruising has resumed around the world in 86 countries. Close to 9 million passengers have already sailed. And we're seeing that those ships are operating really successfully under these robust protocols. Passengers are enjoying the experience, notwithstanding the additional protocols that are in place. They're telling us that they can't wait to cruise, and we'll see those ships return to Australia in due course.
Aussie travel agents say since the announcement was made last week, the phones have been ringing off the hook.
Our travel agents across Australia are seeing some really strong demand. We saw pent-up demand when Outbound International opened in November last year, and we saw some really strong sales across Europe, river cruising in particular. But in Australia, what we've really seen is, since the announcement last week, our phones have been running off the hook. A lot of people are looking at cruising in the next cruise season, so while they are able to come here in April, most ships won't be in Australia until October. At the earliest for the traditional cruise season. So we've got a long way to go, but there's a huge pent-up demand for Australians to travel domestically and also through the Pacific.
French luxury cruise and expedition line Ponant has been operating in other countries for months. The local Australian arm is now getting prepped.
We've been going through different phases, as you can imagine. And so the first phase was trying to save the business that we had on the books and nurture and reassure the customers that were holding those future cruise credits that we were here to support them and to encourage them and guide them through rebooking their itinerary for the following year, which we've done successfully. And then the second objective really was to create a close-to-home deployment, because originally that's what Australians really wanted to do. They didn't want to go far away. So the close-to-home deployment has been developed with new itineraries, new experiences, further enrichment, and that's sold, far exceeding our expectations, which is showing the confidence that the market has.
Ponant is in a unique position compared to the larger cruise lines. Its vessels are smaller, can travel to more unique locations, and the clientele is cashed up.
We've got our Kimberley season coming up. We're incredibly excited about that. Kimberley season runs from late April until September. And then, of course, we're going in and exploring the Melanesian archipelago and Southeast Asia over to New Zealand. But at the same time, Ed, we've got our operations overseas. So we've got the Arctic season gearing up for a fully sold season. We've got the Mediterranean, of course, where people can explore the coastline, and so many other areas around the world. Everything's opened up, which is really exciting.